Alright, Raiden Shogun, the booba sword lady. She can't make a meal, but she's the real deal, who'll pull out her steel and make you f***ing squeal. Now kneel. So I played Raiden Shogun for a little bit. I think she's really cool. My only complaint is the fact that this game has told me to go f*** myself while I was farming a single energy recharge hourglass. It was so bad to the point even with the Staff of Homa, her crit damage was still at 140%. Such a fun game. But she didn't do anything wrong, so let's go ahead with her abilities. And also, I'm going to replace the word energy recharge with the word juice. Elemental skill, Dimension Slash. Raiden slashes the enemy, dealing electro damage, then provides this creepy eye buff that increases your entire team's burst damage based on their own juice costs. This buff will stay active for 25 seconds and cuts open a dimension every time you deal damage to an enemy. It also has a co-op buff that increases the continuous slice damage by 20%, but that's kind of useless for me because I don't have friends. Quick tip, always make sure to cast your Dimension Slash before you switch over to your other teammates to spam their burst, because otherwise Raiden's burst buff won't be applied, and the moment you notice you made this mistake, you're probably gonna feel stupid and then pretend you never did it and add it to your quick tips. Elemental Burst, Booba Sword. There's an active and a passive effect for this ability. For the active ability, Raiden pulls out her Booba Sword from her amazing Booba, like that one character from Blue Exorcist, and slashes the enemies with electro damage and changes her stance into the Booba Sword stance. As you see here, my damage is pretty bad because this game refuses to give me a decent juice artifact. While she's in her Booba Sword stance, Raiden Shogun's auto attack damage is now converted into electro damage, and her auto attacks are now considered burst damage. So let me get this straight for you guys. Your normal attack talent doesn't affect your burst auto attack damage at all. So if you're only going to use the Booba Sword stance for damage, then I don't think you need to level your auto attack talents at all. So do that if you want to save your resources. Your burst attacks will also regenerate juice every time you hit your enemies. So cut your enemies down limb to limb. For the passive ability, every time your teammates uses their elemental bursts, Raiden will build up Booba stacks based on their burst cost. You can also have a maximum of 60 stacks, and to simplify for my tiny brain, I'll just show you how much stacks you gain from burst costs. So she gains 15.2 stacks from using 80 cost bursts, 11.4 stacks from 60 cost bursts, then lastly 7.6 stacks from 40 cost bursts. Also to note, Raiden's burst won't stack since its job is to absorb it. Useless quick tip, if you have Venti, Raiden will be able to plunge attack with her Booba Sword, which is still part of her burst damage, so troll as much as you want. Alright, story time, so let's look at Raiden's past. So I'm sure some of you have seen this trailer and went, hey, when are these amazing characters coming out? Well, unfortunately, if you didn't notice, they're dead. This guy was another Tengu general who died during the civil war between Orobashi and Raiden. This girl went insane and betrayed Raiden. This is the owner of Kazari's memory, and we all know what happened to her. So why did I tell you this? Was it to make you feel bad? Was it to make you feel bad for how these characters with amazing designs will never be playable? Yes. Actually, you know, Raiden's story is full of spoilers and I may have mentioned them and I don't want to go too deep into it. Moving on to passive talents. Passive 1. Raiden will now gain more stacks as she gains more juice. Passive 2. Raiden gains additional 0.4% electro damage bonus and 0.6% juice regeneration increase per 1% juice above 100%. So, if you happen to have a max juice sense and the catch and the 2-piece emblem fate set with 20% additional juice, that totals up to 117% juice above the 100% juice stat, which means you get 46.84% electro damage bonus by default, which is actually higher than the maxed electro damage bonus goblet. Wow! That seems perfectly balanced, right guys? Like the resin system. Passive 3, Raiden intimidates the Mora, which reduces the Mora cost for weapon accession materials by 50%. For constellations, Ball's constellations are half amazing and half useful, so if you're going for constellations, I think you should go for at least C2. So let's go through this. Constellation 1, Raiden gains booba stacks in a blink of an eye. Constellation 2, Raiden's booba sword ignores density, which means she ignores the enemy's defense by 60%. 60%! Let me tell you how effective that is. If you have 60% decrease to your resin regeneration time, you only need to wait 3 minutes and 20 seconds for 1 resin instead of 8. I know, it's really good. Constellation 3, Raiden's booba sword is now a booba sword. Constellation 4, after Raiden's booba sword goes back into her booba, all nearby party members except for Raiden gains a 30% attack bonus for 10 seconds. Constellation 5, dimension slash damage is now increased by as much as it hurts your wallet to get this constellation. Constellation 6, every time you damage your enemies with your booba sword, your team's cooldown is reduced by 1 second, totaling up to 5 seconds. So apparently spamming your burst in the first place wasn't enough. Moving on to artifacts, I'm sure most of you already know, the 4-piece Emblem Fate set is the best piece set for Raiden Shogun. There is no argument there. Her strength is her juice and burst, and the Emblem Fate set provides all. So I won't get into that too much, but I can understand that RNG exists to over your artifacts, so let's look at other options while you farm for the complete set. What I would recommend is the 2-piece Noblesse and the 2-piece Emblem Fate set. I don't think there's any need for you to farm for the Thunder Fury set, mainly because she gets extra electro damage bonus from her juice anyways, and in most cases, you're probably going to focus on crit instead of elemental mastery. You might also want to look at your 4-piece Gladiator and the 4-piece Bolai set as an option, but it's not. As confusing as this may seem, Raiden's booba sword stance count as burst damage, not normal attack damage. Here, let me level my auto attack talent and let's see if the damage is different.
Lightning, divine bolts can strike even in the
Well, what do you know? It's the same. If you are a beginner, I would recommend the 2-piece Exiles and the 2-piece Berserker set. Now, the primary stats you want to go for is the Juice Recharge for Sans, attack percentage for Gullet, and then crit rate or crit damage for Circlet. You may ask why you would want a attack percentage for a Goblet instead of crit damage. That's because electro damage bonus is covered by your energy recharge, and attack is the base of all your damage, which makes this very important. To help you better understand, Timmy times 100 is still 0. If you have nothing to multiply with 100, the number 100 is basically pointless. If you have a higher number to multiply by, this is much more valuable than your electro damage bonus Goblet, especially when you're going to get some anyways. For substats, crit damage and crit rate is both obviously valuable, and then attack percentage, then lastly, juice. Alright, story time. So Orobashi is a snake god that used to breathe until Raiden stopped him from breathing. The snake god took pity on these people who were trapped in the depths of the sea by this thing called Dragon Air of the Depths. Orobashi defeated it, then saved these people and made the Watasumi Island by breaking off the coral that was growing on its body. Orobashi then taught them how to farm and smelt, and these people worshipped it as a graceful god. I know it kind of sounds ridiculous, but that's the story. Anyways, later he kind of attacked Yashiori Island without warning and up this whole peaceful life they had, but we all know how that turned out. Now for weapons, starting with 5 stars, Engulfing Lightning, best weapon for Ball, 55% energy recharge, higher base attack than any 4-star weapons, and the ability that buffs your attack. Mine's at level 70, but it already does more damage than my level 90 refinement rank 5 catch. Primordial Jade Spear, higher base attack stat, extra crit rate, and extra damage from the ability. Staff of Homa, higher base attack than the 4 stars and 66% crit damage, which is very nice. Vortex, I don't have it, but the attack percentage and the ability should be handy. Skyward Spine, high base attack with some ER, and the ability increases your crit rate and increases your attack speed, which is definitely useful for her burst. Moving on to 4 stars. Honestly, I'm just going to mention the catch. It's free, it gives you ER, the ability just simply boosts your damage. There's no reason for you to not go for this if you don't have any of the 5-star weapons. But if you're not in Inazuma yet, which is understandable, I guess grabbing the Star Glitter is fine because you don't need prototypes for the catch, and it's basically the catch with a iffy ability. If you happen to have the Favonius Lance, that's fine too, but the ability won't benefit you in terms of damage. If you go with the Crescent Pike, then you're basically trying to build a wooden house with a wooden spoon. Now for teams. I know some of you are upset because Xingqiu works with Raiden, but Beidou doesn't. Personally, I was upset at first too, and then I used another team 10 minutes later. I kind of forgot about it. Cool thing about Ball is that she doesn't really need resonance. Think of her as a battery that's holding a shotgun point blank to the enemy's head whenever she attacks. You really can't go wrong with Ball. But characters that I would recommend. For for buffers, I'm sure if you pulled for ball, you may have come across the booba simp, Sarah. I think they do work pretty great together, especially in terms of juice, but since that isn't going to be a big issue, it's not really mandatory. But if you do happen to come across a C6 Sarah in the future, just remember this booba simp will give your Raiden Shogun a 60% additional crit damage, which is huge. You can still use Bennett as well. His buff is more effective than Sarah's in terms of the attack bonus ratio. He also heals too, so just take your pick, or use both because they're buff stacks anyways. You can also use animal units with a 4-piece Verdicent set for additional electro damage, or you can use a Geo unit with a 4-piece Archaic Petra if you feel a little bit unsafe. When you are building your team, you would think that having the highest juice cost team is the most efficient way for Ball to build up her stacks, and that's true. Oh, you thought I was going to add something there. Well, you can still build up stacks by collecting juice particles, but this only takes effect every 3 seconds. But then again, you can also just build a juice efficient low cost team and just spam their burst 2 times in a row, then switch into Raiden, since even if you have 3 80 cost characters, you only gain around 45 stacks. Meaning you might need a sub DPS with ER efficiency while Ball is chilling here for max stacks. My suggestion is Xiangling. She's free. I don't know why you wouldn't use her when she does so much damage in the first place, so she's pretty great with Ball. You can also just put a 60 or 40 cost sub DPS in your team if you want, since the 2 80 cost characters are going to give you around 30 stacks anyways, so just use them twice if you want to max stacks. Remember I said if you want to max stacks. No one is holding a shotgun point blank to your head to reach max stacks anyway, so no worries. You're probably either going to have dead enemies by the time you try to stack up to the limit, or you're probably going to do a decent amount of damage with the stacks you've got already anyways. So yeah, don't try to complicate your head with this, because Raiden is also in your team to buff your other characters, so choose what you like the most, but I would suggest to move away from cryo damage DPS because superconduct isn't that great unless you're insane enough to build physical Raiden. God no, please. Now for tips, Raiden is kind of a confusing character, but I'll try to give you guys some tips. Number 1, use your Dimension Slash before you use your burst, because your burst damage isn't increased by default. I make this mistake 90% of the time. Number 2, Raiden may be able to do big damage, but remember, this only lasts for like 7 seconds. If you're in a situation where you're out of juice after you use your burst, because sometimes the enemies are spread out all over the place, and sometimes you do too much damage, so you don't gather enough juice for your team. This is why I recommend other batteries, just in case your enemies are weaklings. But that's it for the video, guys. If you guys did enjoy, hit that thumbs up and subscribe, and comment down about your thoughts on Raiden Shogun. Hope you guys have an amazing day. Bye bye, guys.